During repeated military exercises, the Chinese Communist Party (CCP) military has expectedly exposed its bureaucratic mindset, formalism, and lack of real combat capability. One example, reported by CCTV-7, illustrates this clearly. During a nighttime drill, a unit decided to save trouble by loading all weapons and ammunition into a single military vehicle instead of having soldiers carry their own guns. On the way to the exercise site, the vehicle was ambushed and all weapons were seized. The exercise control team coldly announced total defeat dismissed. The unit's leader protested, arguing that they had no chance to fight back before being declared defeated. They even accused the opposing force of unfair tactics, but the response from the control team was blunt. Without weapons, how are you going to fight? Go home and get some sleep. The reason for transporting weapons separately comes down to fear. Fear of losing guns and ammunition. In the CCP military, losing a rifle, a magazine, or even a few bullets is considered far more serious than losing an exercise. A missing weapon could result in military court proceedings for the responsible officer. A retired soldier revealed if a single 155mm shell goes missing, the entire exercise stops and thousands of troops from both sides spread out to find it. If a rifle is lost, the commanding officer's career is over, and prison time isn't out of the question. If every soldier carried their own weapon, there would be a risk of losing guns or ammunition. A single missing bullet could mean an officer losing the rank. That's why locking all weapons in a single vehicle seems like the safest option. Whether the exercise was won or lost was a secondary concern. This logic may seem unusual, but in the Chinese militaries, it is standard practice. The CCP military is not entirely unwilling to take things seriously, but its focus is often misplaced. Years ago, a newly appointed brigade officer was celebrating a personal achievement. His son had just been admitted to the Air Force Academy, and on the day of the acceptance, he arranged for pilots to perform aerial stunts over their base, leaving trails of smoke in the sky. The next day, however, the brigade received unexpected orders. They had been selected as a target for a military exercise, simulating an attempt by a small foreign force to destroy their airfield. From officers to enlisted soldiers, the entire brigade immediately went on high alert. Every possible security measure was put in place. Patrols, concealed sentries, and fixed guard posts. Special attention was given to the pilot dorms, headquarters, aircraft, fuel depots, and hangars. Every road intersection had double guards. Soldiers were given smartphones with orders to photograph any enemy or ground troops as proof of elimination. Some key locations were equipped with cameras, allowing personnel to film suspected enemies on sight. The brigade was confident in its defenses. To further reinforce security, they brought in additional reinforcements from another unit. With these preparations, they believed the exercise was firmly in their control. However, they overlooked a critical vulnerability. The airfield was in a low-lying area, next to a series of fish ponds connected by drainage ditches leading to a river outside the base. The opposing ground forces discovered this route and managed to swim through the drainage system undetected. Under the cover of night, they infiltrated the brigade's defenses. After scouting the area, they found the aircraft heavily guarded, leaving them with no opportunity to strike. Instead, they targeted the brigade's equipment trucks, an easy target that had been overlooked. Without making a sound, they destroyed multiple vehicles from the logistics and transportation units. They then moved on to the fuel depot and took it out as well. By the end of the raid, 4 attackers had been killed, 3 were captured, and 9 managed to escape. Despite the losses, the win was significant. After the attack, the brigade was ordered to scramble aircraft for a counterstrike. The commander, believing that the underground fuel supply was intact, was not overly concerned. However, when the ground crew prepared the planes for takeoff, they discovered a major problem. The equipment trucks were gone. Without them, they could not load the aircraft with necessary supplies. As a result, the planes were unable to take off. The entire unit was left waiting for hours. By the time they were ready, 17 hours later, the forces they were supposed to support had already been declared wiped out due to lack of air defense. After the incident, the brigade quickly upgraded its defenses. The drainage ditches were reinforced, and infrared surveillance cameras with automatic tracking were installed across the base. Even fish surfacing for air would trigger monitoring, and any unfamiliar individual approaching the area would receive an automated warning. DJI drones were deployed for 24-hour aerial patrols. The system appeared flawless. However, the following summer, an unexpected issue arose. The brigade's political commissioner went swimming in one of the fish ponds. After staying underwater for a while, he surfaced with water plants clinging to his face. The cameras failed to recognize him and immediately triggered an alert. Sirens blared across half the aircraft as soldiers rushed to the scene with their weapons. The situation escalated further when the drones locked onto the commissioner, who, wearing only swim trunks, stood frozen on the shore. Hundreds of soldiers surrounded the pond, holding their breath. The command center quickly canceled the alarm, but the 5 minutes of confusion left a lasting impression. Frustrated and embarrassed, the commissioner ordered everyone present to run laps under the midday sun. After this incident, 24-hour drone patrols were discontinued. Instead, drones were deployed manually only when cameras detected a potential threat. A year later, the drones were deemed ineffective for security and repurposed for spraying herbicide and bird repellent. This reflects the actual level of defense capabilities in the CCP military. Another example comes from a training exercise conducted by a combined arms brigade, where the situation took an even more unusual turn. The brigade commander received intelligence that the enemy's 3rd Battalion had taken control of Hill 1. The enemy's 4th Battalion, an armored assault unit, was expected to arrive within 20 minutes to reinforce them. If the two enemy battalions managed to join forces, it would put the brigade in a highly unfavorable position. The brigade's objective was to prevent the enemy reinforcements from reaching their destination. The commander immediately gathered his staff to formulate a strategy. Final plan was based on a key observation. Hill 1 lacked air defense capabilities. The brigade decided to deploy electronic warfare aircraft to disrupt the communications between the enemy forces. Meanwhile, the 1st Battalion would set up an ambush along the reinforcement route, while the 2nd and 3rd Battalion launched a full-scale assault on Hill 1. The plan appeared solid. However, shortly after takeoff, the electronic warfare aircraft were detected by an enemy early warning plane. The exercise control team reported, "Your electronic warfare aircraft have been identified. The enemy has called for reinforcements. Their fighter jets will arrive in 30 minutes." 30 minutes later, the electronic warfare aircraft were forced to retreat. At that moment, Hill 1 had not yet been secured, and enemy reinforcements were advancing at full speed. The brigade commander made a quick decision, ordering the 1st Battalion to block the reinforcements for at least 2 hours. An hour later, the enemy's 3rd Battalion on Hill 1 had suffered heavy casualties, losing more than half its troops. The 1st Battalion successfully held back their reinforcements, preventing them from advancing. Victory seemed within reach for the brigade, but then the exercise control team delivered another blow. Your 4th Battalion had been hit by an enemy tactical nuclear strike. The entire unit has been wiped out. Under pressure, the commander analyzed the situation. If the 1st Battalion could hold the enemy reinforcements for an hour, then the 2nd Battalion could be able to do the same. The battle for Hill 1 was nearly decided, and the 3rd Battalion should be sufficient to secure the area. Based on this reasoning, he ordered the 2nd Battalion to withdraw from Hill 1 and redeploy to Region 2 within 10 minutes to reinforce the 4th Battalion's position. At the same time, the reserve force was sent to support the 3rd Battalion to ensure a swift victory. Just as the commander felt confident in his decisions, another message arrived. Your 2nd Battalion has passed through a radiation-contaminated zone without protective measures, resulting in a 1/3 casualty raid. The bad news did not stop there. As the reserve force entered the combat zone, the exercise control team made another announcement. The reserve force has hit a minefield, losing half its personnel. The commander was stunned. Where did the mines come from? The control team responded calmly. A roadside fruit stand. The boxes didn't contain fruit, they were landmines. This response left the commander on the verge of collapse. In the final moments of the exercise, the command post was eliminated by enemy special forces. A brigade commander, fearing a decapitation strike from the opposing Blue Army, came up with an unusual plan. He swapped his rank insignia for that of a junior non-commissioned officer. During the day, he led battles as usual, but at night, instead of sleeping in the command tent, he hid inside a motorbike kitchen truck. The most surprising moment came when a military news reporter arrived for an interview. The disguised commander gave a serious and detailed analysis of the battlefield situation, speaking with confidence. The interview went on for quite some time before the reporter suddenly realized something. Wait, why is your rank insignia that of an enlisted officer? Only then did the commander remember he was still in disguise. Embarrassed, he broke into a nervous sweat. A retired Rocket Force regimental commander once shared a story from his time in service, an account so absurd it could be the script of a comedy sketch. His regiment was stationed in the Gobi Desert, an isolated area with a 50-kilometer radius of barren land. Aside from the barracks, not even a blade of grass could be found. One day, the phone in his office rang. "Commander, there's been a car accident." Hearing this, he panicked. A flood of possibilities rushed through his mind. Did a vehicle crash into the barracks? Negative, Commander. No injuries, and the vehicle is mostly fine. The accident happened outside the base. His breath, a sign of relief. Military vehicles were government property, considered even more valuable than soldiers' lives. Did it fall into a ditch? Negative, Commander. The vehicle hit a tree. The commander froze in disbelief for 5 seconds before shouting, "We're in the middle of the Gobi Desert. There isn't a single blade of grass for 50 kilometers, just one lone tree. And you're telling me the vehicle managed to hit it? Did the driver use GPS to locate it and drive straight into it on purpose?" The reality was clear. In a vast, empty desert, a military driver had somehow managed to crash into the only tree in sight. During a military exercise, a major mistake was made by a missile unit mechanic. The command center issued an emergency launch order requiring the unit to complete the full launch process. Missile launches are similar to rocket launches. Normally, the missile body only contains navigation and warheads, the fuel being loaded just before launch, a process that takes at least 10 minutes. While newer solid fuel missiles do not require this step, the unit was using an older model. As the countdown reaches zero, the missiles are supposed to take off. However, the radar showed nothing. There was no movement. The regiment commander, growing anxious, called the site for answers. The response was hesitant and unclear, with personnel only saying, "Commander, you need to come here." The voices were filled with panic. Rushing to the launch site, the commander had not even stepped out of his vehicle before spotting the missile. It had collapsed. The steel-built missile, meant to stand tall, was crumpled like a deflated balloon. When asked what had happened, the mechanic explained that everything was normal when the missile was transported from the base, but as soon as the fuel was injected, it suddenly caved in. No one could tell if it was sabotage or a structural failure, but the exercise had failed. A team was sent to investigate. Within 2 minutes of arriving, they identified the problem. The mechanic responsible for fueling had inserted the hose into the wrong port. Instead of pressurizing the missile, they had connected it to an exhaust valve, effectively creating a vacuum inside the missile. Discussions about the combat capabilities of the Chinese military often bring up the Blue Army, led by Man Guangji at the Zhurehe trainee base. Known for its dominance in exercises, the Blue Army has repeatedly overwhelmed Red Army units. The reason behind this success lies in the extreme advantages given to them. Man Guangji's Blue Army was equipped with overwhelming firepower and used unconventional tactics. In some exercises, they even deployed nuclear weapons, leaving Red Army units unable to fight back. But rather than proving the strength of the Chinese military, these exercises highlighted internal contradictions. The Blue Army had advantages that went beyond normal training scenarios. Its tanks could withstand 10 direct hits. It could summon bombers out of nowhere, secretly plant tracking devices, dig anti-tank trenches, and even disguise personnel as local government officials to conduct assassination operations during exercises. The Red Army suffered defeat after defeat, losing 32 out of 33 engagements. Even in its sole victory, only 15 soldiers and a political commissioner remained, forcing them to rely on bayonet charges to turn the tide. In one exercise, the Blue Army introduced a special tank with altered specifications that made it nearly invincible. Against Red Army forces, it could destroy enemy tanks in a single shot. However, when the Red Army fired 10 missiles at it, the exercise command declared that tank was still operational. This wasn't the worst of it. Another exercise limited to Red Army's attack routes to two narrow paths leading to a Blue Army-controlled hill. The Red Army commander, having preserved his tanks through earlier airstrikes, decided to launch an all-out assault. According to pre-exercise intelligence, the Blue Army had exhausted its air support. However, Man Guanzhi suddenly summoned an overwhelming fleet of bombers covering both attack routes with airstrikes. The bombings stretched for over 10 kilometers, blocking every possible path for the Red Army's tanks. To ensure the tanks were completely eliminated, the bombing lasted for 2 full hours, leaving nothing behind. The Red Army commander, shocked by the unexpected development, protested that the Blue Army was not following the exercise script. Man Guanzhi's response was simple. Unexpected situation happened on the battlefield. The Blue Army's air power is a little stronger than you anticipated. What's wrong with that? In another exercise, Man Guanzhi introduced a tactical nuclear strike. A single nuclear weapon wiped out half of the Red Army. Within the Chinese military, it became an inside joke that if an exercise command ever declared a unit had been destroyed by an electromagnetic storm, it was likely Man Guanzhi's doing. Beyond its powerful equipment, the Blue Army also demonstrated highly effective battlefield tactics. In one instance, a combined arms brigade from the Eastern Theater Command served as a Red Army. Recognizing their strength, Man Guanzhi secretly purchased over 100 tracking devices and had them placed under Red Army's artillery and missile vehicles before the exercises began. As soon as the battlefield started, the Red Army's heavy firepower was wiped out immediately. The Red Army refused to accept this and formally complained. Man Guanzhi later apologized and promised not to repeat the tactic, but he showed no sign of remorse. Instead, he justified it by saying that real battles involve all kinds of unexpected factors, and this was just one of them. In another instance, Man Guanzhi had Blue Army soldiers dig a 3-kilometer-long, 2-meter-wide anti-tank trench on a key route that the Red Army had to pass through. This was done secretly the night before the exercise without informing the exercise command. Since Blue Army vehicles used tracks, they could cross the trench easily, while the Red Army's wheeled vehicles were completely blocked. The Red Army discovered the obstacle during reconnaissance and filed an immediate complaint. The exercise command ordered the Blue Army to fill the trench. The Blue Army complied. However, just 4 hours before the exercise began, Man Guanzhi had his troops dig the trench open again under the cover of darkness. When the battle started, Red Army infantry fighting vehicles were left stranded, becoming easy targets. For years, Xi Jinping has repeatedly emphasized the need for a military that can fight and win wars, allocating massive defense budgets to build the so-called strong army dream. Party media had continuously broadcasted carefully choreographed footage of military parades and exercises to showcase an image of an invincible force. However, behind the cameras and beyond the spotlight, the reality is starkly different. Bureaucracy is rampant, real combat readiness is lacking, and from commanders to soldiers, many remain caught in a cycle of self-deception. The aggressive military exercises near the South China Sea, East China Sea, and Taiwan Strait may be more about posturing for domestic and international audience rather than actual display of combat capability. Whether this force can truly succeed in real warfare remains an open question. Recognizing these challenges, the CCP may prioritize gray zone tactics. cyber operations, and economic measures as alternative strategies to achieve its objectives. Analysts note that such approaches warrant close attention from Western nations and neighboring countries. The next time reports surface about large-scale Chinese military drills around Taiwan, it may be worth recalling the incident described here: a missile collapsing into a vacuum, an officer disguising himself as an enlisted soldier, or a military vehicle inexplicably crashing into the only tree in an empty desert. Behind the impressive fleets and roaring fighter jets may lie a reality far less formidable than it appears.